The woman in seat 1A. Janelle Carter took her seat in 1A of the Stratosphere Airlines flight with the kind of quiet authority that didn't need to be announced. The tailor navy pantsuit she wore fit her like a command. Her posture was impeccable, the weight of her name heavy enough to fill the cabin, even if no one around her recognized it. But she was used to that. Being underestimated was often the first mistake people made around her. She was the founder and CEO of Carter Syntech, a global leader in AI security systems. The woman in one, it wasn't just traveling to Geneva for another board meeting. She was sealing a multi-billion-dollar merger that would change the tech landscape across Europe. Years of fighting to be taken seriously in rooms dominated by white men in expensive suits had earned her this see not a favor, not a stroke of luck, but a position carved from grit and brilliance. Janelle had pre-ordered her usual lobster bisque, followed by medium-rare filet mignon, and a glass of vintage red from Chateau Margaux. This meal had become her signature on international flights, a quiet ritual that reminded her she belonged in spaces built to keep her out. As she placed her Hermes carry-on in the overhead bin and settled in her seat, a male flight attendant greeted her with a mechanical smile, barely making eye contact before immediately turning his attention to the white man boarding behind her. Janelle said nothing. She didn't need to. She had long mastered the art of observing silently and remembering. Shortly after takeoff, a blonde flight attendant approached. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Caroline. I'll be taking care of you today." Her voice was pleasant, but her eyes told a different story, glassy, indifferent, calculating. Janelle nodded politely. "I believe my meal was arranged in advance." "Yes, of course," Caroline responded. Her tone clipped, as if Janelle had interrupted more important work. Time passed. Other passengers in first class were served delicacies. Janelle watched as crystal glasses were filled and caviar tins opened with reverent precision. But when Caroline returned, she held a plain tray with a cold sandwich and a plastic cup of water. "We're out of your pre-ordered meal," she said with a neutral expression, setting the tray in front of Janelle as if it were a standard offering. Janelle didn't speak. She simply looked at the tray, then at the woman who had just dismissed her as unworthy of more. "I pre-ordered this meal a week ago. I have confirmation," she said calmly. Caroline gave a shrug. "The system must have glitched." No apology. No explanation. No replacement. Just a shrug. That was the moment everything shifted. This wasn't about lobster bisque anymore. It was about being reminded yet again that excellence, black excellence in particular, could still be invisible in rooms that praise themselves for inclusion. Janelle didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she picked up her phone and opened her company's secure internal systems. With a few swipes, she accessed passenger logs, crew assignments, and historical service data. Her team had built an AI tool for exactly this reason to hold systems accountable when people failed. The attendant's name? Caroline Foster. Years of minor infractions, passenger complaints all brushed aside by Stratosphere Airlines' internal HR. No formal discipline. Just warnings, recommendations, excuses. Janelle sent a message to her chief compliance officer. Activate service ethics protocol. Flight 717. Crew ID CF 4271. Flag for discrimination and service manipulation. Within minutes, her team in New York was running facial recognition pattern checks, cross-referencing service logs, and matching passenger complaints with crew behavior. The data was damning. 12 incidents involving minority passengers. 0 disciplinary actions. As the other passengers around her enjoyed their wine pairings and gourmet meals, Janelle remained still. Her face gave nothing away. But every keystroke was a quiet act of resistance, a scalpel dissecting the polished veneer of luxury service. By the time the plane crossed the Atlantic, her assistant, Nadia, had delivered a fully compiled behavioral analytics report. Bias interaction rate, 87.6%. Behavioral discrepancies confirmed through video footage and AI analysis. The report was encrypted and sent to the CEO of Stratosphere Airlines with a simple subject line: urgent, Flight 717 Incident Formal Request for Ethics Review. Back in first class, Caroline walked past her again, offering another warm smile to the man across the aisle. She never once glanced at Janelle. But Caroline would soon find herself under internal review, and she wouldn't even know it until her badge was flagged at the gate in Geneva. Janelle remained calm. She was playing a longer game. As the flight landed, the pilot's voice broke the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Geneva. Please remain seated until the aircraft has come to a complete stop." The plane taxied to the gate. Passengers rustled, reaching for coats and carry-ons. Janelle waited. No rush. She glanced at her smartwatch. Protocol received, it read. CEO of Stratosphere has ordered an immediate internal investigation. Crew to be held for review. Legal counsel mobilized in Geneva. At the gate, 2 individuals in black suits waited. They weren't greeters. They were part of Stratosphere's executive crisis team. Without saying a word, they nodded at Janelle, then walked down the jet bridge toward the rear crew exit. Caroline, still unaware, smiled as she handed off a blanket to another passenger. But as she stepped into the jet bridge, her smile faltered. A uniformed investigator stepped forward, holding a tablet that displayed her name and employee ID. "Please come with us," he said. "This is a formal inquiry. Failure to comply will result in immediate suspension." Her expression crumbled. Janelle, meanwhile, stepped into the Geneva airport, flanked by local security and a company liaison. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Her presence alone now echoed louder than any press conference ever could. Hours later, a meeting was convened at Stratosphere headquarters. On the screen, Nadia presented video evidence, analytics, and a summary of systemic bias in crew behavior across multiple international flights. Stratosphere's board fell into stunned silence. By evening, the CEO of the airline had issued a public statement. "We acknowledge the failures in our service culture. We will conduct a complete internal audit, retrain our staff, and implement an equity review system with oversight by Carter Syntec." They didn't use the word racism, but the world did. News outlets erupted. Black Tech CEO shakes airline industry. One denied meal sparks systemic review. #Seat1, a trended worldwide. And through it all, Janelle Carter never once raised her voice. She didn't need to, because real change doesn't always come from protests in the aisle or viral videos. Sometimes it begins in silence with a sandwich tray, an indifferent glance, and the quiet determination of a woman who decided to let the system indict itself. A week later, Stratosphere announced the launch of a global equity initiative led by Janelle. All flight crews would undergo mandatory cultural sensitivity and bias training. Service protocols would be redesigned to prevent subjective prioritization. Internal communication would be monitored by AI-assisted auditing tools created by Carter Syntec. Janelle returned to New York without fanfare. No interviews. No podium. Just a quiet weekend at her home, watching the Hudson reflect the sky. Her assistant handed her a letter from a high school student in Chicago who'd read about the incident. "Miss Carter," it said, "I used to think people like me didn't belong in tech. Now I know we do. Thank you for showing us how to sit in 1A." Janelle smiled. Then, with a pen in hand, she wrote back, "You belong in every room they try to keep you out of. And when they serve you less than you deserve, remember you don't have to shout. You just have to act." She signed it. Janelle Carter. Founder, Carter Syntec. Seat 1A.